Have you ever seen an orchestra at an opera? The amazing harmony, cohesiveness, the integration of man and machine producing a composition of masterful serenity and enjoyment. Well, as great as the individual performers may be, they require a conductor in order to ascend to the epitome of their destructive force. On June 7, 1981, with an orchestra of F-15 Eagles and F-16 Fighting Falcons, the nation of Israel conducted a military operation that changed the history of the world.
June 1981, 8 fighter jets are spotted in the skies over Baghdad, preparing to attack. Their target, the pride and joy of Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein.
It was one of the most important military surprises of all time.
As the jets dive at their target, stunned Iraqis stare in disbelief. The insignia on the wings is the Star of David, the symbol of the Israeli Air Force. How could Israel strike from such a great distance without detection? This is the story of one of the most daring and dangerous military operations ever attempted.
General David Ivry, then commander of the Israeli Air Force, was the conductor of Operation Opera.
Hello, General. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Great to meet again. What is that picture behind you all about? The one above the satellite photo.
At the time, Secretary of Defense Cheney, then he came to be, of course, the Vice President, but this took place in 1991 after the Desert Storm, and it looks, or it shows the nuclear reactor near Baghdad over there with all the walls which defending it, but no reactor anymore inside. And Cheney was writing over there to General David Ivry, a kind of appreciation of what been done, outstanding job on a nuclear reactor in 1991, which made our job much easier. 1991 Desert Storm, Cheney.
What was your position at that time?
I was the Chief of the Air Force. I got to command in 1977, October 1977, and November 77, President Sadat of Egypt came to Israel to talk in the Knesset, if you can recall.
It's a bit of history,
so
sure.
One side it was the spring of peace is going to come, and the other side, which the Prime Minister said, begging, it's a second Holocaust can be. So this
and you're a young general. You're a young general at that point?
I was very young. I was 43 years old when I got to command.
To understand why Israel would conduct such a military operation they knew would be condemned by the world community, it's critical to understand two geopolitical realities. Saddam Hussein, the psychopathic president of the nation of Iraq, was a man who had killed tens of thousands of his own citizens and was currently at war with the hated Shia country of Iran. Saddam Hussein viewed Israel as Iraq's greatest enemy and publicly spoke of Israel's destruction as a necessity for the advancement of the Arab world. With a clear understanding of Saddam's apocalyptic objective and fully understanding the vulnerability of their tiny nation, the Israelis concluded they had no option but to attempt the destruction of the Osirak nuclear reactor. And that reactor was quickly developing atomic bomb capability. From the Israelis' perspective, Saddam Hussein, armed with weapons that could annihilate their homeland, was such an existential threat that it simply was not an option. It was time for Operation Opera.
General, it's very difficult for the average person to grasp how a jet fighter can fly 100 feet off the ground, 600 miles an hour for 500 miles, and then bomb a target 100 feet underneath it, and what the airplane has to go through to make that happen. If you can take a minute and help us understand how that works.
Well, first, you have to plan it good. So you're putting on the map the point which you have to start pulling up. Because you are trained and you are doing it on models and say, this is a distance from the target that I should start pulling up. At the same point which you are starting pulling up, actually the leader is the one which is doing it. He's pulling up, he has a high speed, you mentioned about 600 knots. You're pulling up very easy because this is a lot of energy. You're coming up to about 9,000 feet from low levels, as you mentioned, 100 feet, 2,000, 10,000, 9,000 feet. Getting into this way. Changing.
Over.
Oh,
wow.
You make a kind of overwing, we call it in some way, and getting into the target. And now aiming on the target. Pressing the pickle, what we call. Bombs are not released immediately, as I said. Computerized system is working, and now once you're trying to pull up in this, somewhere in the stage, the bombs are optimized to the target. They have been automatically been released. You are trying to pull up to get into a horizontal situation. It's about 2,000, 3,000 feet, and immediately disengage the target to get out of the AAAs. So again, it's very low flying at 100 feet, at the point which you have on the map.
Already
planned.
Predetermined.
Predetermined.
Okay.
You start pulling up, the leader is doing it, everybody is getting into a line behind it, 8 airplanes doing the same. So each one is looking at it. You have to keep close because you don't have, you want to have a shorter time exposed to the same batteries. So it's about 45 seconds between number 1 is aiming on the target to number 8 aiming on the target in the same position. Each one, you can be in different places, but you are aiming, pulling the bombs, pulling away. Very high G on the pulling, at about 4 or 5 Gs. Straightening and flying away.
יש באמת נ"מ, לא יודע אם זה נ"מ. אתה נכנס באוברטרנינג קל. פלפל מוץ. אוקיי. יש נ"מ באמת. רואים נהדר. עכשיו מתחתיך 2. פלפל סגור.
And once they all hit low level, then went high, when did they call back with a code word and say everything's okay?
Immediately after breaking down and getting that, organizing himself as a formation, what they call, 2 fours. And you call, a leader is calling each one, and each one has to respond with his call sign. Number 1, number 2, number 3. There's a call sign of the formation, saying okay. And number 8 is the one which has to be the last one. He was hesitating for some, because he was in high G and so on, and he was in some way delaying his response. So it took another 10, 15 seconds, which are sometimes longer than 10, 15 years. But he did it, yeah.
He called in.
Yeah.
All right, so now, when you heard number 8 check in, was there a cheer in the room? Was it quiet?
No, it wasn't a cheer, because I know this is what you are seeing in all the pictures and all the films. The major problem was the way back, as I mentioned before. So my concern was not, I was happy about to hear this one, but now it was really concentrating on what are the challenges, threats which are coming on. Because before, so on the way back, you know that you're over there and you're flying high. So now you have to follow up all the, airfields, SAM batteries, who is coming up, who is raising up, who is launching an interception and so on. So you're coming to a higher attention than before. Before it was much concern.
It's a secret before, yeah.
Now you're in intention to see what's happening and how to react.
Who did they fly over in the sea there? Did they fly over somebody?
King Abdullah, this was on the way in.
On the way in?
On the way in, they were flying low on the Red Sea, actually, down to Eilat. But they have a direction which in some way had the intention to go into Saudis. But King Hussein was on a yacht on his weekend, Sunday, and he's seen the F-16 running above his head almost. And he called the command post in Jordan and telling them, I've seen F-16, can you follow it up and see what's happening? And of course they got very seriously about it and tried to check with radars, but everything was below radar, so they didn't detect it.
So who is this man, General David Ivry? A man who has flown over 30 different types of military aircraft. A man who has been in combat for most of his life. A man who has commanded one of the most lethal air forces in the world. A man who was the Israeli ambassador to the United States. A man who has served his nation for over 50 years. And a man who now leads one of the great aircraft companies in the world. There is much more to tell about this unique man, as illustrated by this one harrowing situation early in his combat experience.
I'm wondering if you know what this is. Do you know what that is?
This is a super mystery.
From what I understand, when you were 25 years old, you had a little experience with that?
1959, I bailed out of it.
You ejected out of this?
Yeah, I bailed out of it. I've been in a spin, lost control on the airplane. Got into a spin about 35,000 feet. Went down on about 25 turns and 6,000 feet above sea level, which was the limit. Decided to eject myself. Ejection seat was working, luckily.
Obviously.
And actually I had about 10 seconds for a parachute getting down. When it opened, it was quite close, not very far from the land itself. Landed safely. It was sands over there, so it was very easy from this point of view. So I was the first one in the Air Force to activate it. And people didn't believe, but
here you are. And it wasn't a training flight. You were in combat against the MiG, right?
It was partly combat because I've been in some way the one who was trying to get the MiGs after me so that they are going to get into a sandwich which other pilots are going to shoot them down. And the aircraft actually got in a pitch-up, we call it. I mean, the nose went very fast and lost all the speed and got into a spin.
What was going through your head as you're...
Oh, a lot of stories at the time. It's a very short time, but you can go all your life behind it. My wife was at 8 months of pregnant with my first boy. Should I come back home, yes or not? It's one of the questions which you're asking yourself. And the tough decision to eject, you know. It's a kind of an Air Force which every airplane is very much a treasury for everyone, because you don't have too much money to buy them. To eject it means that we are losing one. So it's a big decision to be done. I waited to the 6,000 feet and this is it, I did it.
Pulled it.
Otherwise, yeah, there were some pilots which hasn't done it. And so it's a tough decision which you have to take.
General David Ivry is a legend in his nation of Israel, but also a man who stands tall as an example of courage, of dedication, of professionalism for all freedom-loving people worldwide.